Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Hey Corner Crew podcast. I am your host, JJ Lang, and with me, as always, is my wonderful co-host. You know him, you love him, Nate, the little goon Foss.
Hey, what's up? This break has been horrible.
Yeah, it's been way too long without hockey. But we have a present for you guys leading up to Christmas. I will pass it over to Nate to introduce our special guest for today.
So today we have with us a gentleman who has seen almost everything as it pertains to RIT hockey. He's done well over 1,000 games. He is a recent inductee to the RIT Athletics Hall of Fame, the voice of RIT Tiger Hockey on Witter 89.7 and the RIT Tiger Sports Network, Mr. Ed Trefzger.
Thanks, guys.
Hey.
Really appreciate the opportunity to do this.
Of course, Ed. I mean, I think we can speak for everybody that you've kind of become the unofficial official voice of RIT hockey over the airways for a very long time. So I know everybody, all of our listeners and viewers, are going to be very happy to have you on to hear your thoughts on some things.
Okay, great.
So starting off, just in case for some reason people have no idea who you are, which at this point I have no idea how that's possible. If you want to just introduce yourself real quick, that would be awesome.
Okay, well, I've been part of the RIT hockey broadcasts on WITR since we started this current consecutive years of broadcasts all the way back to 1982-83 season. Did various things, worked in the studio between periods, did stats, filled in on color, filled in on play-by-play, and for like the last 14 seasons or so, I've been the primary play-by-play voice of the Tigers. So I was the student station manager when we started doing the broadcasts back then, and we started out doing just home games that year until the Tigers made the NCAA playoffs. And what they do, they went ahead and won the National Division II championship that year. So it was a great way to get started, and it's been fun to be part of it ever since.
Yeah, that's incredible that you've been with the team that long and have seen that many things. So it's safe to so you started as a student, correct?
Yep.
I was gonna say, so you are an alumni. I thought you were an alumni. So what made you want to get into like radio broadcasting or working on the radio?
Well, when I came to RIT, actually, I wanted to work for a reporter.
Okay.
And I had been the editor of my high school paper and had been part of that for several years. So during orientation time, right before classes started, I went down to the reporter office in the Student Alumni Union building and walked in and introduced myself to the editor and said, "Hey, I'd like to work for a reporter." And she said, "Well, what experience do you have?" And I said, "Well, I worked for my high school paper and edited that and went through a little bit." And she looked at me, kind of looked up and down and said, "Well, this is college, honey." and kind of walked away. So I said, "Well, that's not going to happen." And then I ended up in my dorm room, and the door was open and the door across the hall was open. And the guy across the hall was listening to WITR, and there was a station promo on there saying they needed people to work in the news department, newscasting, writing, and so forth. And I said, "Well, I can do that." Went down there and figured maybe I would help write some news or something. Next thing I knew, they had me on the air doing the news, and then I was news director and then station manager, and then it kind of all took off from there. So that's how I got into it. Although when I was a kid, I really liked to listen to pick up distant radio stations and keep a log of them as a hobby. So I've kind of been into radio all along.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Awesome. So I guess into the hockey aspect, great start for the Tigers so far this year. What are your thoughts? I mean, this is definitely one of the better teams we've seen in a long time, and it's been really fun. So what are your thoughts?
Oh, man, there is so much to like about this team. One of the things we do on the broadcast, like when we're in the car and so forth, especially mid-season, is we give everybody a report card. And I'm not going to tell you everybody's grades, but everybody had pretty high grades, and we weren't grading on a curve. So that tells you a lot. I think the thing that jumps out at me the most is that every time the Tigers have had a lot of success at Division One. There have been two things involved. One is defensemen who get involved in the scoring, and second is really solid goaltending. And I suppose you could add depth of forward line. So we're seeing all that. But, the defensive pair of Jojo Casero and Aiden Hansen-Bukata has just been phenomenal to watch. And, I couldn't be more thrilled for how Jojo Casero is playing. And, one guy who was very happy to see that was Jared DeMichael when he was here for the Hall of Fame inductions, because he had recruited Gianfranco Casero to UMass and was very happy to see him end up at RIT, where he could get great coaching and more playing time and so forth. And, his performance has been great. And the two of them on the power play, on special teams, it's just been superb to watch. Really good freshman class this year. You get three lines that are scoring, and then a fourth line that is doing what a fourth line needs to do. So, the only deficiency, and maybe we'll get to that, but the only deficiency I've seen is in taking a few too many penalties. But fortunately, the penalty kill's been good. So there's almost nothing to complain about.
I was going to say, I think leading into that, was there anything you think they could improve on going into the second half of the season? Obviously the penalty trouble has been huge all year, but like you said, the penalty kill has also been outstanding the whole season as well.
Yeah, I think that's an area where they need to improve, and I wouldn't want to see them get less aggressive, but there are points in a game where you need to be, for lack of a better term, less stupid. If you're jostling with a guy before the face-off and he gets you annoyed and then you spear him, that's stupid. Or if you have the opportunity to go on a power play and you get into retaliation and you lose that, that's stupid, that kind of thing. Or mouthing off to the officials. Some of those kind of things are things I wish they wouldn't take. But one of the things that we noticed this season is in the periods where the Tigers don't take a penalty, they tend also not to score. And so if they take their foot off the gas pedal, that's not good either. And some of them, if a guy gets a 5 instead of a 2 for something along the boards, maybe he's gone a little too far. But, it's the unnecessary penalties, not the aggressive ones, that kind of bother me, I guess.
I guess who's been a surprise to you this year? Who's kind of come out of nowhere and like, hey, this guy's been pretty good, or he's had a really big impact?
Well, it's hard to say anybody's come out of nowhere, but I guess I'd have to put Casero at the top of that. I think I was a little disappointed last year. I expected a little more, and this year I'm seeing more than I expected. He's been nothing short of terrific, and I think he's got to be, he's got to be a first team All-Atlantic hockey this year, and maybe up there in the consideration for player of the year, the way he's been playing. Those kind of numbers as a defenseman are just fantastic. But go ahead.
I was going to say, Nate and I have said on this show multiple times on the podcast that we have absolutely no idea how UMass allowed him to leave and come here with how he's playing now.
Well, I saw him play for UMass in the national semifinal in Pittsburgh in 21. And he only played on that night because there was a player that was out of the lineup for COVID protocol, and he and one of the goaltenders were on their way from Amherst to Pittsburgh in the car. And so they couldn't play on that Thursday night. He was like the number 7 or number 8 defenseman. That's a team that certainly that national championship team was at the level where maybe it was hard for him to crack the lineup. And so, that's the difference with some of the teams that have a few NHL draft picks as opposed to maybe teams in Atlantic who are, maybe we have a first line that's like a second line on one of those teams, and maybe a first defensive pair that might be a second or third on those. But but I think if he'd had the opportunity, they could have seen him play like that there. Definitely.
So I guess kind of getting away from this because it's come into play for actually the first time in a long time this year. I know your favorite P word, the pairwise.
Yeah.
I know it's still a little early, but for those who don't know, because we do talk about it a lot in Discord, what is the pairwise? How is it and how is it calculated, and why does it matter?
Okay, well, simply put, the pairwise rankings are a mathematical model that was originally created to sort of mimic or replicate the way the NCAA chooses teams to be at-large teams in the tournament and then how they're seeded. Eventually, it got to the point where the NCAA was using basically the exact same formula. So whatever you see in the pairwise, those are the numbers that they look at. What that does is very objectively determine who's going to be in the tournament and where they're going to be seated 1, 2, 3, or 4 in a region. The reason or the things that are calculated in it, one part of it is the RPI, the ratings percentage index. And that's a formula that looks at your winning percentage. That's 25% of it. And then it also includes your opponent's winning percentage and your opponent's winning percentage. And then there are some bonuses in there for home and road. There's a multiplier in quality wins against teams. But essentially what's important about that is how strong your schedule is, which comes from how your opponents and their opponents do. So that's where a team in Atlantic Hockey may have a little bit of a difficulty, although the league's getting better every year and is better this year, because if your league non-conference winning percentage is low, then you need a much higher winning percentage to make up for it. So that's one part of it, the ratings percentage index, the RPI. Then it's also head-to-head against a team. You compare that, and it's also record against common opponents. And they take those three measures and take all the teams and match you up against each one. And for each one you win the comparison, you get 1 point. So the top team will win 61 comparisons this year. And then if there's a tie in those comparisons, then they use the RPI as a tiebreaker. So for all intents and purposes, the RPI is the number that does that. The reason it's important for RIT this year is because of their strong winning record. They're right around 18, 19 in the pairwise. If you can get up to about, say, 14 or above, then you have a good chance at an at-large bid. And if you're in that range come the middle of January, about 80% of the teams that are up in that will end up being in the playoffs historically over that. I'm disappointed that Atlantic Hockey isn't higher than it is. When I looked this morning, it was a 361 winning percentage out of conference. CCHA is 411, and right now the CCHA would only get one team in. So you need to get above 400 in your league and have a good winning percentage to go after that. But it's kind of fun to be in the conversation, you know?
It's
I was going
different
to say,
for
like,
us.
it's been really fun to, like now it's like usually, oh, the pairwise doesn't matter at this point. Like, I remember a couple years ago we were joking like, oh, we're number 3 in the pairwise after like the second weekend of the season.
Right. Just
But
not
now it's like, yeah, they're still hanging around here a little bit, and it's been fun to be actually in the rankings for the first time in a long time this year. I mean, I thought after the Princeton game, I was like, oh, we're never getting back, and then they proved me wrong. So
yeah, I mean, Princeton's a better team than they were last year, and they're doing okay.
they are.
It's the weekend. There are 2 weekends that are huge for RIT in the pairwise, and one is coming up on the 30th and the 31st against Penn State. Penn State's had a terrific season so far. They're doing very well in the Big Ten. The other is against Arizona State. Arizona State is at the point where they can't afford to lose very many games now. They're going to have Denver, they're going to have RIT, but after the RIT weekend, it's going to be teams like Lindenwood and LIU and the Alaskas and so forth, and they can't stumble there. And right now, they're almost in do or die territory. So those are going to be big games for them in a great atmosphere in Arizona. But I think if the Tigers can come out of these 2 weekends 2-2, then they're in good shape. 3-1 would be phenomenal. And it's going to tell us a whole lot about this Tiger team, especially against Penn State.
Oh, yes. Penn State's going to be huge.
As my buddy Jim Connolly, who I do some podcasts with for USCHO.com, likes to say, Penn State shoots from the popcorn stand. They basically they're averaging well over 40 shots a game. So it's going to be a challenge for whichever or both the two goalies who might see action that weekend.
Those are
I was
going
gonna
to be.
say I was at the Penn State Michigan game down there where Penn State put up 49 shots and beat Michigan 3-0, and they're a really good hockey team. Both of them.
Yep.
Penn State's a very good team. It's gonna be a fun weekend, hopefully. And
Yeah,
I have personal reasons why that series matters. So
well,
I have a buddy that goes to Penn State, so we're looking forward to that one.
I think RIT can match up with them. I mean, they just have to know what they're up against. The Tigers need to take care of their own end of the ice, and they need to attack the Penn State net. But that's kind of the formula now for hockey in general. You're going to see that in the World Juniors. They're going to be a team that's going to play really good defense, really be solid around their own net, and just really attack hard on the other end. And I mean, I think that's why the sport of hockey is so great right now. It just, I don't think the sport's ever been more fun to watch.
Yeah, it's been something this year so far. Talking about other teams outside of just RIT, do you have any in particular that you do enjoy to follow or watch, either on a year-to-year basis or any that you kind of check in on from time to time to see how they're doing?
I've kind of rekindled my fanship of the Sabres and the Amerks over the last couple of years. Even if you are a fan of another team in the NHL, you just have to. I think you have to. I say you have to just love the Sabres. The young players that are playing with a little swagger and enjoying being there. Don Granato is universally respected by just about any coach you want to talk to. So when I get a chance, I try to look at that. I don't get to watch a lot of NHL during the college season. For the stuff I do with USCHO, having to do 3 podcasts and a column every so often, I really have to keep up on all the other games. I had a guy on Twitter give me a hard time. He said, "Well, you got to watch the games." And I said, if I watched even a replay of every college game every week, that would be basically every waking hour. So I got to watch clips. I got to watch a few games. I got to look at stats and stuff. It's hard to keep up with it because you're talking about maybe 50 or 60 games on a weekend, possibly. So I do try to keep up with that. I really don't have another college team that I root for. I tend to root situationally between contests about teams in our league. And when anybody in Atlantic hockey is playing outside the conference, I root for the Atlantic hockey team because it helps us. Sometimes I have to hold my nose, but see, I've explained to people I wear different hats. In fact, I probably should have been wearing this hat, but I have to wear, when I'm doing an RIT game, I'm wearing my RIT hat, literally or figuratively. And when I'm doing kind of college hockey in general, I have to kind of just love the sport, not love any particular team. So in the different roles, I have to be in different places. And if I get to go to a women's game and I'm not broadcasting, then I get to just be a fan, which is really the best.
So you say you try to watch a lot of college hockey around, and we're kind of at the halfway point. Who's been your surprise team around college hockey? Like who? Not to use the same term, but who's kind of like come out of nowhere, like kind of unexpectedly?
Well, I wrote earlier this week that if you were paying attention last year, you would have expected to see a pretty good Merrimack team this year. But I don't think anybody would have expected them to be, number 3 in the pairwise, top 10 in the polls, all that.
Nope.
They're doing terrific. My second most unexpected team is Michigan State. I got to do an interview with their head coach, Adam Nightingale. Obviously, Jared DeMichael is one of the associate head coaches, has a great reputation as a recruiter and as a coach. Nightingale has got a great enthusiasm for it. He's back at his alma mater. They've got great goaltender in Dylan St. Cyr. So that's a team I think has been a real surprise. And it wouldn't shock me to see them pull a couple of upsets in the postseason.
There's a big old RIT connection at both of those schools. So
yeah, actually, yep, definitely.
With Will, and I was going to say Merrimack is the Will Calverley effect, but
yeah, and I think that's a good example. That's a good place to compare where Atlantic Hockey stands and where maybe a top team in Hockey East stands. Will is still a great player, but he's been a little bit more of a role player at Merrimack. Not to take anything away from him, but that's a case where maybe an Atlantic Hockey first liner is a second or third liner on a top tier team. But that gap continues to get narrower each year.
Oh, yeah.
Great to see.
Yeah.
Going back to RIT hockey, do you have any favorite memories of calling any RIT games? Men's or women's, could be either. I mean, obviously your Frozen 4 hat probably leans more towards that's probably one of them, but...
Yeah.
That was magical. I still say before you start that UNH game was your best game you've ever called, by the way. Every once in a while, I still have that saved on my SoundCloud, the post game. And every once in a while, I'll pull it up.
Oh, man. If I listen to that, I get a little choked up,
I do too. I'm with you.
Yeah, that weekend, I got to say those were my 2 favorite games. But there have been some really exciting ones otherwise. But that I remember before the Denver game, we're driving to Albany. It was Chris Lurch and Scott Bigger and myself. We're like, do you want to stay over after the game tonight, or do you want to drive back? We kind of figured, well, they'll come and they'll have a good game. And when they won, we're like, whoa, and then, well, okay, tomorrow, are we going to stay over after the game, or do we want to head back? Because we're thinking, well, we could get back and meet the team, but then we could also hang out here with some of the parents and some of the fans and all. That New Hampshire game, the way RIT exploded quickly and took the lead was amazing. And you've got to just picture the atmosphere of where we were. So we're in the whatever they call it. What was it? It was the Times Union Center.
I think it's like
I forgot what they call it. It's been 12 different.
I don't know.
Yeah, and it was the Pepsi Center and Knickerbocker, so we're sitting. Our broadcast position is on the front of the balcony, right about the blue line. We've got the fan section down to the left of us, the RIT section, and we have the band next to us. And sitting right behind us in the first row of the seats is former RIT Executive Vice President of Student Affairs, Mary Beth Cooper, who's now president of Springfield College. And, they'd score and she'd come over and she'd be like patting us on the back and getting excited. And when they won, she was all excited. And we went to a break before the post game. And we turn around and she's just kind of slumped in the chair. And she looks at us and she says, how am I going to get everybody to Detroit? So, but that was, that was amazing, that whole thing. And then part of it, and I just watched the post-game interview that came up in my YouTube feed the other day. It was Wayne Wilson at the NCAA press conference. And one of the things he talked about was how loose the team was. And so they weren't feeling the pressure, and they were probably going to feel that way into the Frozen 4, which they did. That's when D-Mike had his famous underdog, overdog, Snoop Dogg. I don't, that comment. But the sad thing about that Frozen 4 is the ice conditions at Ford Field in that temporary ice rink were absolutely atrocious. And all the teams were told, you're not allowed to talk about that. And in that game against Wisconsin, all it took was a couple of little funny bounces and to give the Badgers momentum, and kind of the game ran away with itself. None of the games were close of those 3 games. It was cool to be there. It was cool atmosphere. Um, it it made all the difference. That trip had a lot to do with Atlantic hockey advancing. There wouldn't be a Gene Policini Center without it. There's so many things that came out of it. The effort to finally get athletic scholarships, that's been an ongoing process. That wasn't something that just happened last year. That's something that's been pushed for a long time. And, all those things, the women's team going D1, all of that came out of that run to the Frozen Four. And when you think about it, 5 years from Division III to go into that, my boss at USCHO, the owner of the website, Tim Bruley, said to me when RIT went Division I, and I don't know why he came up with this, but he said, I'll bet you a steak dinner that RIT is in the Frozen Four in 5 years. But he was right. I don't know where it came from, but yeah,
That's awesome.
Quickly, some other games I know that that comeback against Canisius when the Frozen Four team was there.
So good.
That was great. You guys may have seen video of that 2002 game against Elmira where RIT scores 3 goals and then scores the game winner with Sam Hill with a couple seconds left. Ritter was never louder than that was. The game with Jocelyn Guimond in net where he made, I think it was 67 saves in RIT's first Division I win against St. Lawrence. That was another game. The last couple of minutes where he was out of his mind. So there've been a lot of good ones along the way, and probably some that I just can't remember very vividly because a lot of them start to blur after this long.
So, speaking of going to Detroit and driving all over the country and flying who knows where for different things, do you have any good road trip stories? Any fun any arenas or particular places you like to travel to, or any fun memories you have along the way?
Oh boy, yeah. There's some
that you can share.
Yes, yeah, that you're allowed to share.
Some of those are going to stay more private,
yes.
But earlier on, we tended to travel with the team more on the bus. I remember I guess I'm going to go in chronological order here. I remember one time being on what was an old school bus that was painted white, and it was affectionately called the Great White Heap. And the athletic department had this crummy old bus that was cold and everything. And I remember one time on that bus coming back from Elmira, and the former head coach, Bruce Delventhal, was pretty upset about things and was passing out the sub sandwiches like footballs and just really angry. And then he sat down, and we're sitting in the seat behind him, Randy and I, and he turns around and says, do you guys like ice fishing? And we're like, but I remember some of the first trips we made to arenas in the Wayne Wilson era. Like the first time we went to Oswego, and we're pulling up there, and he'd heard about what the old Romney Fieldhouse was like, and we're pulling up and we see the basketball arena, and he said, oh, that's not so bad. And the guys were like, no, coach, that's the arena. But then walking in, one of the things I remember about some of the road trips, without getting too specific, early on, like in the transition, was when RIT was making the move to Division I, and the chair of the Atlantic Hockey Committee was the former athletic director at Canisius, and he came in with a couple of people from the league and with league commissioner Bob DiGregorio, and they were walking around Ritter Arena and the locker facilities and visitors and everything, and they came back with a whole list of improvements that needed to be made. And then we went on the road starting to play some of the schools in Atlantic hockey, like American International and their Olympia Ice Center, which is, like a 30-year older version of Bill Gray's and a little bit, aluminum bleachers, the whole bit. Or the Milford Ice Pavilion where Sacred Heart used to play, that held like 600 people in rickety wooden bleachers, and the boards were all crooked. And the one time we were there, I think it was the first time, there were 3 locker rooms, and RIT was in the ones on the end. And there's like a 10-year-old's birthday party going on in the middle one. Or then when we went to the John A. Ryan skating arena.
Oh, the Jar.
Or the Ja, if you're from Boston, where Bentley used to play. So that's why it's cool that places like Bentley and Sacred Heart have such better arenas, because not only does that help them, but that helps RIT, because if you're bringing somebody into RIT as a recruit and you show them the gene, they're blown away. And you show them the campus, they're even more blown away. And then they find out, well, half our games we got to play in dumps. That's not so great. So it's really helped RIT to have everybody improve things. But there are always some fun things along the way. One of the things that we always try to do on a road trip, especially if the games are at normal times, not like 11 a.m. or 1 p.m. or whatever we have to do sometimes. Not mentioning any names, AIC, but
I was going to say it.
they're working on it. You know what?
They're getting there.
They're a lot smaller school than RIT, and so they've got fewer resources, but they do have a nice facility to play in there. But anyway, they have to share it, so they get it at weird times. But we try to do something like that. I love going on the trips to Air Force because I like going out to Colorado, and we've gone up Pikes Peak and done some stuff. But I'm really looking forward to going to Arizona State to see their new arena, the Mullet, this year.
Yeah, it's gonna look good.
That's a trip I wish I could pull.
Yeah,
it's definitely, if we ever go back, that's definitely on my bucket list for sure.
But I like visiting places around the league, and I know these teams are our rivals or are hated and all, but they're great people just about everywhere we go that we get to know. I mean, we've gotten to be good friends with the guys at Air Force and at Bentley, and our friend Nikolai Busko at Army is one of a kind guy, and it's fun to see him. And a lot of the sports information directors on the league and around the league bend over backwards for us. So, yeah. And if I'm going to mention people around the league, I've got to mention a guy that probably most people are not even aware of. He's in his second year working with the league. He's the associate commissioner and basically the PR guy and statistics guy for the league, Todd Bell. He has been phenomenal since he started with the league last year. So much in the way of statistics and notes and everything. Getting to work with him, getting to know him has been great too.
It's been noticeable too, like from a fan perspective. Like, stats are more relatively available. Like I was looking up a record. I don't even remember which one it was. But I was trying to see where Cam Burt was on the league all-time point list, and I found it so easy where in years past where it would have just been impossible to find.
Yeah, he went to town. He put together this.
So that media guide is awesome.
Like, I don't know. The first one he did was 108 pages. I don't know how long this year's is, but it's terrific.
I think it's longer.
Yeah.
I assume you've heard what the team calls Dwyer. The Purple Prison.
This is
I'm
JJ's
not sure I have, but
Kobe told us when he was on, they call it the Purple Prison.
Well, I can see that. That
it's not. It's relatively. It's not
bad.
It's not bad, but it got so dark in there when they put those black and purple murals up on the wall. They used to be white. So that arena was originally designed so that they could expand seating on both sides. Maybe someday they'll get the opportunity. It's I don't have anything against the Niagara program, but I think it's just awesome to have an in the league. Great. And, they, that their coaches even said that he hates RIT. And even though Canisius is their big rival, we're right there. So I think it's good to develop a level of hate. We haven't had a team like that since the D3 days with Elmira.
Something about purple, man.
I
know.
Something
still
about
love,
purple.
it was one of my first away games I ever went to. We went to Dwyer, and I beat Nate there, and he walks in and just screams at the top of his lungs, "I hate this place." Just instantly. You could have heard a pin drop, and he just yells, "I hate this place." And he just went on a rant for like 5 minutes about Dwyer. It was really funny.
Well, everybody in the league has to hate RIT simply because of the mobile corner crew that shows up. I mean, that last game against Canisius, there's the corner crew over there making all kinds of noise, and we look over and they're like 7 students from Canisius with their hands neatly folded on their lap, and it's like, whose home game is this? So
I've been jokingly saying that the month of February we have 5 home games at GPC, and 3 home games in Buffalo. So
yeah, well, and definitely a shout out for the Instagram video showing the Canisius fans how to get tickets and how to get to their arena. Oh man, that's
some trouble came about that apparently.
Dan,
We'll keep that.
I laughed out loud at the comment about that. That's another arena where disappointing hockey is played.
I laughed at that one too. As a Sabres fan, I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
So you've obviously seen a bunch of them. Who are some of your favorite players to have watched at RIT?
All time to have watched?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
All time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's kind of cool, and I someday I'll have to go through and like memorize it. Former sports information director Roger Dykes, who's involved with the hockey or with the Athletics Hall of Fame committee. One of the things he gave me on the induction is this notebook that's got all the rosters and statistics for all the teams going back to 82, 83.
Wow.
So, I mean, a lot of that stuff's on the internet, but a lot of it's not.
Through that.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, the first player who really jumped out at me he's also still the all-time leading scorer for D1 and D3 combined. And that's Chris Scooter Johnstone, who was just phenomenal. But that team, I look at the roster here and I think of some of the guys on that team. That was a pretty magic team that went on to win that first Division II championship. People will know Dave Burkholder's name. He was the goalie on that team. And then went on to coach at Niagara. But, there's so many guys along the way. I hate to leave anybody out. I mentioned some players at the Hall of Fame reception that we had. And I mentioned 2 who were not in the room. But I mentioned some who were in the room, like Simone Lambert was there. Isabelle Richard was getting inducted, so he was there. And we all saw the wedding proposal at the Blue Cross game. That was fantastic. So talked a little about him and mentioned the game, that Elmira game and that comeback. It was Mike Tarantino who was there he'd been inducted in the previous year and was at the reception. He's the one who fed Sam Hill at the goal mouth. So he was there, and, of course, Jared DeMichael and that. But 2 guys, not so much as on the ice, but just sort of how they sought out to kind of be friendly and friends with us, were 2 guys I mentioned there. And the first of them that I mentioned was Jeff Smith. Now, when Jeff played for the Tigers, and he was part of that Frozen 14, he would come up to the press box before every game and say hi and shake hands. In fact, the first time we spoke to him in person was his freshman year, and RIT was playing at Cornell. And he came up to us before the game and said, hi, I'm freshman Jeff Smith. I just wanted to make sure you guys were saying my name right. So we kind of got
Could he
fun.
could he have a more generic name, Jeff
I know,
Smith?
but we got kind of a kick out of it, and he's the guy who got the whole Movember thing going at RIT. And I don't know if you've seen, but he's in the running for in hockey in Germany for the best mustache. And I remember him talking before a game at Colgate, and his dad was there. His dad, Steve, and Jeff said to us, he says, "I wish I could grow a righteous push broom like my dad." I just always remembered that phrase, righteous push broom. But interestingly, there must be a mustache connection or a Movember connection, because the other guy I mentioned was Todd Skirving. The latter part of his career at RIT was probably a disappointment to him because of so much injury. But he was another guy who would come up and wherever we were and say hello and all. And during the stretch when he was injured, sometimes he'd hop on the air with us between periods and all. But those guys meant a bit, just from the personal standpoint. But I could go through these rosters and probably pick out players from every year. And even just as I look at it here, I'm reminded of different people along the way who are just terrific. I think of one of the great finds that Wayne had in his first season that he brought into RIT as he was trying to put together a team and scramble for equipment and everything, was goaltender Tyler Overman, who was a terrific player and just a great guy. So, they're just people all the way along that have been terrific, and certainly the guys on the ice have been fantastic. So I could probably take 2 hours and go through a list, but there've been a lot of them over the years.
I was gonna say, bringing up Skirving, because Todd Skirving, every year ever since he's graduated, he gets one vote in the fans' choice poll every year. He always gets at least one.
Wow, well, that's kind of cool.
I sent him a message on Instagram last year when he got that vote, because I was like, every year it's been consistent. Every year he gets one vote, and we know who it is. Yeah. But
I sent him a note. The winner this year for the no chin, kind of the whole thing, mustache that Todd always does, and this year new Finland Todd is must the screen. So I sent him the picture.
So I did purchase one of those shirts, and I think it's here. I sent it to my parents' house. But so you mentioned working with USCHO, and I know you've covered a bunch of Frozen Fours over the year. You get to go every year. What is the best game you've ever covered non-RIT?
Wow,
I know it's a bunch, but
those all tend to blur together. This past year, when Denver made the comeback to win, it was fantastic. Those games were all good. I got to cover the Albany Regional. I think my favorite of all of them has to do more with a post-game press conference, and that was when serious underdogs Michigan State won. I think it was 2007 in St. Louis, and Jeff Lerg was their goaltender, and Jeff was listed at about 5'6". I mean, not the prototypical college goaltender, let alone NHL, but he was fast and he could stop the puck. And they had lost, and I forget which one of Ryan Miller's brothers it was, but he had turned pro and he didn't come back. So like a fourth line guy was the captain and all. And I'm forgetting the captain's name, but they're sitting at the press conference in the NCAAs, and Lerg has this grin that wouldn't stop, and his captain is just crying his eyes out the whole time, and Lerg is looking at him and laughing, and it was fun to see that. Those press conferences, the little things you see are the things you see behind the scenes, like when in Barry's first season at North Dakota in 20, when they won in Tampa, out for the press conference, And Brad says, hold on a second. And the first thing he does is go up and give each of the players a hug. And you could see it was kind of interesting to watch that dynamic because we had been used to seeing Dave Hackstall, which you've seen with the Flyers and with the Kraken. And, Hackstall is really kind of a easygoing kind of a guy, but when he's in coach mode, he's got piercing eyes and he looks like he's got his face set for the game and the whole bit. To see that was kind of cool. In fact, one of the things with USCHO that's been great is having the opportunity to talk to a lot of these coaches. And in the past few years, I've asked a lot of questions and learned a lot about how they interact with players and how they care about developing the players as men and not just on the ice, and how they really have to think about not just coaching X's and O's like maybe a few years ago, but really trying to develop the whole human. To hear the guys talk about that and their approach to it is pretty interesting. But Frozen to April, I'm
planning on it.
Are you? Oh, it's phenomenal
for a certain team that wears orange and black. Hopefully,
let's hope.
Hey,
I know it's still early, but
yeah.
I don't know. No, I seriously this team. It's reminding me so much of that 2010 team. It's almost kind of scary because it's now the thoughts are starting to creep into the heads of.
Well, you
got to
remember one thing. That 2010 team started the season 0-5.
Oh God!
It was like really
here we
started
go again,
to roll
right?
the second half of the season. Now, if the Tigers can put together a second half of the season that's anything close to what they did the first half, well, it's going to be terrific. There are 18 games to go. Even if they went 500, and I hope they do better than that, but even if they went 500, that would be a 21 win regular season. If they go if they go 12-6, that's 24-10. That's crazy. So what they've accomplished so far has really set them up well. Right now, they're 3 points ahead of AIC, but AIC's played 3 more games. Right. Now, you got to win those games you have in hand, but everybody's chasing RIT right now.
It's nice to be the team that everybody's chasing, not having to, oh, what did this team do this weekend? Or what did this team do? No, it's just, how did we do? You take care of your business and you're fine. It's been fun.
And for me, what's also kind of looking at it as from a fan perspective is a lot of the teams that are closing in, they're I don't want to say closing in on us, but that are closer to us point-wise are Sacred Heart, AIC, Holy Cross. Those guys are kind of up there in the top of the division, the top of the conference, but we swept all of them, so it's kind of we have easy tiebreakers, all of them. So even if they do catch up to us, we still kind of have that nice little nugget in the back of our minds of we don't have to worry as much about some of those guys. Obviously, Niagara will be huge.
Well, yeah, Sacred Heart and AIC, we're only playing them twice, so we've swept those, and that's done. We do have to visit Holy Cross at the end of January, and Bill Riga has done such a good job with that team. They kind of been hit or miss, but when they're playing like he wants them to, they're very good. And if you remember, those games with them were not easy.
No, they were close.
One of them went to overtime. And he was a huge part of Quinnipiac's success. So he's trying to build a tradition there and build a team there. I think they're going to be somebody to watch out for in the next few years.
They're definitely a team I don't want to play in March.
No.
I don't know. And I said it even after the games against us. Yeah, they lost. Yeah, we beat them twice, but like you said, they were not easy games. And
you reminded me of a couple of my bad memories at Holy Cross. The first one is RIT goes there for the playoffs, wins the first night. A bunch of guys get a stomach bug. They're terrible the second night. Game goes to overtime the third night. Puck's going around the boards in the RIT zone, kicks off a linesman's skate, springing a 3-on-1 towards the RIT net. Xander Kukali was the one, and just he has nightmares over that. But but the other one should have been the only career goal for Daniel Spivak. This is before video, and Scott Bigger and I were doing the game, and they had us set up kind of along the goal line at where our table was, and that was where our IT was shooting. And we see the puck go in and hit the upright in the back and then come out. And I called it a goal for Spivak, and the guys are mobbing him because everybody knew it was a goal except the guy with the stripes and the armbands, and waved it off. And there was, and we were just incensed when we saw that. But what were you going to do before video? Now they would have gotten it right most of the time.
Atlantic hockey officials. Man.
But I will say this: the officials do try to do a good job.
Yes,
and they've been getting better each year. They're more athletic.
For the most part, like, let's be honest, it hasn't been horrible this year. It's been way worse before. That's what I try to tell people. Still not great, but
it's getting there.
It's so hard for the officials in a number of ways. One, the rules keep getting more complex. Second, the speed of the game keeps getting faster and faster. Third, even though they made it a point of emphasis, diving and embellishment. And that makes their job a lot harder. And I'm not going to name the teams. I'm really not going to name the teams, but there are teams in the league that are known for that. You know, they fold like a card table when you hit them or something. You know, fold like a table at a Bills pregame. It doesn't help the game at all.
So I think, Ed, before we close out, there is something that I know I want to share. The people in the corner, while we're at games, a lot of them I know, Sarah, Randy, a bunch of other people. You'll see people with earbuds in during the game. That's because they're watching the game on the ice with your commentary in their ear.
Wow, that's cool.
Every game. I
always.
Wow.
I
appreciate that.
I've become really good at it. Away games, I'll time up flow with your broadcast. So
yeah, I appreciate that. It means a lot to us, and you know where it's really meant a lot is to parents and grandparents of the players, where we've been the connection. And when we get to meet some of them, it's really cool. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, I know there's been multiple games where I'm sitting here and I just hear someone behind me just scream, "Yes, Ed!" Because like they're listening to like you've said something and they're just like so in agreement of it, and people are looking at them like, "What are you talking about? Who? What are you listening to in your ear?" And then they find out they're listening to you, and they're like, "Oh, never mind. Like we figured it out now." It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I do credit you and Scott and Randy and Matt and Chris. Like I've been around RIT games. There were years where I did not miss a single away game on the radio. So, and that's how I'm able to listen to hockey on radio as well as I can, because you guys really, really brought that to me at an early age. So I really do appreciate it. And
great!
You guys are the best.
Cool. Thanks.
So.
Yes.
Thanks.
Do you have any last comments or thoughts you want to leave the viewers or the listeners with?
Tiger fans are just really fortunate to have had such a good program and one so well run over the years. You know, when Wayne Wilson came to RIT, we figured, okay, he'd be here 3 years and off to something else, and instead he was part of getting it to Division I. I remember when he brought the idea up to us, and we thought that he was kidding or a little nuts, but he made it happen. And you know, each step of the way, there's been an improvement. The Frozen Four, the Gene, and now getting athletic scholarships, which are going to make a difference and are already making a difference, and which Wayne has already passed out to current players as well as incoming ones. Each step of the way, it's been done just so well. I know we get disappointed with years that are down, but our down years are like most teams' good years.
Yeah.
So. So being around the program is really a privilege for anybody who gets to be a fan.
Yeah, I don't think I could have.
We're definitely spoiled. That's for sure.
Yep, very much so. With that being said, I think we'll go ahead and we'll wrap it up here. Thank you again, Ed, for coming on, for taking time out of your very busy schedule to come on and just kind of chat with us and do this interview. It was very fun.
We'll have to do a part 2 sometime, maybe after the season.
Well, thanks. I really enjoyed catching up with you.
That being said, if you have not already, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the notification bell so you are notified when new episodes go up. Maybe when part 2 with Ed comes around at some point, you'll be notified when that happens. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we're also on there. Make sure you follow on that. You can thank Dan Scully for the Apple Podcast one because he complained enough about it to where we actually went through and did it. We told you guys there was some surprises coming. Obviously, this is one of them. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, everybody out there. Have a great night, and go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
RIT, RIT, RIT.